to do to help us, help this state, help all the people in this state. We see the COVID numbers, and we see the reality, and we know what we have to do. Let's thank the Yankees and their president, Randy Levine. Let's give them a big round of applause. They have really gone above and beyond. This has been a vaccination site for months. You normally don't have a baseball stadium as a vaccination site. And I remember the first conversation when I called the Yankees and asked them about it. It was an unusual request, but I've made a lot of unusual requests as governor over this past year, but they stepped right up. They've been great. They really have been great. To my left, Jennifer Jones-Austin, who needs no introduction from me. She's the CEO of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, but she has a long history in government and community service. Let's give her a round of applause. Murad Awadeh is to her left. He's the Executive Director of the New York Immigration Coalition. We thank him very much for being here. Thank you. To my right, star legal counsel through all of the COVID chaos, Beth Garvey. Thank you, Beth. Frankie Miranda, who's the president of the Hispanic Federation. We thank him very much for what they've done. And Joanne, thank you so much for everything you've done. She's the executive director of the Asian Society, so thank you very much. I also want to acknowledge Kenneth Shea, who's here, the Chief Strategy Officer for the Charles B. Wang Community Health Center, Therese Rodriguez, CEO of APICA Community Health Center. We also have Pat Wang, President of Health First. Thank you very much. And we're joined by Dominique Sharpton, who's the Director of Membership for the National Action Network, and Ashley Sharpton, Founder and Director of National Action Network Youth Huddle. Let's give them a round of applause. From my team, we have Rosanna Rosado, the great New York Secretary of State. Thank you, Rosanna. And Vanessa Gibson, council member and the incoming president of the Bronx, Vanessa Gibson. Okay, let's talk about today and where we are. Let's start with the good news. It's Monday. We can start with the good news on a Monday. It was a nice weekend. Good news is we have a birthday coming up today. Whose birthday is it today? It is the birthday of New York State, which turns 233 years old today, day from when we ratified the Constitution. I think New York State looks good for 233 years old, don't you? Let's give New York State a round of applause. And the good news is that 75% of adults in New York have been vaccinated, 75%. When the president first set 70% as a goal, I can't tell you how frightening that was for us. 70% of the people in this state had to receive a vaccine. It seemed almost impossible, right? The diversity of this state. But we hit the 70%. And we're now up to about 75%. So that is really, really great news that New Yorkers stepped up and New Yorkers stepped forward, that we could administer the vaccine to that many people, and many of the people in this room made that possible because everyone had to be deployed to do this. But New York did it. New York did it. And I'm proud of the state, and I'm proud of what everyone in this room has done to make that a reality. Well, then what's the bad news? Bad news is when you do 75%, it means 25% have not received the vaccine. And 25% may be a relatively small number, but it is a lot of people. 3.5 million unvaccinated people. These numbers are hard to put into context. 3.5 million is a lot of people. 3.5 million is larger than 21 states' total population. Think about that. We have an unvaccinated population larger than the entire population of 21 states. And then when you put this COVID Delta variant, which is transmitted much easier than the normal COVID virus, you put that variant together with 3.5 million people, that spells spread of COVID. That is what is happening. We know that's what's happening. We see it in the numbers. 1,900 positives yesterday. 1,900 new COVID positive cases. Well, how does that compare to where we were? Last month, 346. Numbers don't lie. 346 to 1,900 in just 1 month. And remember all the work we did to get here. 72% of the new positives linked to the Delta variant. It is what they say it is. It is spreading faster than the normal COVID virus. The vaccines are working. Only 0.15 of vaccinated New Yorkers have been infected by the COVID Delta variant. Think about that. Only 0.15 of the people who received the vaccines. The vaccines work. They work. And it's proven in the numbers. Those who are vaccinated reduce the risk of hospitalization by 94%. So if you're vaccinated, you are much, much less likely to get the COVID virus to begin with. And if you get it, it is not as severe and you're not hospitalized. Those are facts. What we're looking at is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. A pandemic of that 25% of the population that has still refused to get the vaccine. So the problem now is vaccine hesitancy. We've had a lot of problems that we had to overcome over the past year. First, we couldn't get the tests, remember? Then we got the tests, but we couldn't get the swabs. Then we couldn't get enough tests. Then we couldn't find enough places to put out the tests. Then we couldn't get enough vaccine. Then we couldn't get the vaccine distributed fast enough. All of that has been done. We're now closing vaccine sites. Why? Because there's no demand for the vaccine compared to the number of places that we have giving out the vaccine. The problem now is vaccine hesitancy. They don't want to take the vaccine. And look, I've had thousands of these conversations. I get it. I truly get it. Some people, communities of color, have had really horrific, historic experiences with vaccines. It is true. Tuskegee experiment, it is true. So the cynicism, the skepticism, some people ideologically, well, government says we should do this. I think it's all a government conspiracy. I don't think there is any such thing as COVID. We've all had all the conversations. And then some people are just nervous of the vaccine. Well, it was created quickly. I don't know if they fully tested it. I get it. These are not arguments that I am unsympathetic to. But on balance, they don't make sense. There's no logical theory that anyone can advance now that says it's more logical not to take the vaccine than to take the vaccine. There's no logic to that argument. Well, we don't know the long-term consequences of the vaccine. We don't know what's going to happen a year or 2 or 3 or 4 down the road. Yeah, but you don't know what's going to happen on the long-term consequences of COVID either, do you? And you know that there's information about what they call long-haul syndrome. People who get COVID, and they don't just get better in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And they have lingering symptoms. And nobody can tell you that COVID in 2 years and 3 years and 4 years inside the body isn't going to come back as something else, right? Once that virus is in your body, it's there. And it can have other manifestations in years to come. Nobody can tell you today what it means to have COVID 2 years, 5 years from now. So yes, we don't know the long-term consequences of the vaccine, but we don't know the long-term consequences of COVID either. And I would rather take my chances with the long-term consequences of the vaccine than with the long-term consequences of COVID. And then some people are just in denial. Oh, this is going to come and this is going to go and there's no real problem. This is all a media and political creation. Denial does not work as a strategy. Denial does not work in life. If you deny a problem, you are never going to solve it. If you deny that you have an issue, whatever it is, you're never going to solve it. And you're condemned to living with it. Some states took the course of denial. Some political theories took the course of denial. It's not a problem. We're just going to live our lives. We're not going to succumb to COVID. We're just going to go out there and live our lives. Florida now has the highest number of cases of COVID, and it's growing rapidly. Why? Because denial doesn't work. We know that for a fact. What do? Get smart. Target the communities that have high COVID spread and a low vaccination rate. Be smart. We have the data. We're looking for 25% of the population that has been unvaccinated. Target that population and target it in areas where you're seeing COVID spread and you know you have a low vaccination rate. We have zip codes across the state, 117 zip codes. Only about 6.7% of the state has new positive cases above the average and a vaccination rate below the state average. So we're focusing on those 117 zip codes. In New York City, Bronx, Staten Island, Brooklyn, tends to be communities of color, tends to be poorer communities, tends to be communities with less access to health care. And over 61% of those zip codes in the state are in New York City, which is not surprising because New York City has the larger population. You go to Long Island, 21 zip codes, 18%, and that's where the 25% of the population lives. That's where COVID's spreading. That's where the vaccination rate is low. That, my friends, is what we have to target. We know where this is happening and where this is spreading. Other parts of the state, it's in the Mid-Hudson, it's all over the state. But we know exactly where it is by zip code. And it is Capital Region and Central New York and Mid-Hudson. It is the Mohawk Valley. It is the North Country, Southern Tier. It's everywhere. But it's targeted and it's focused. We have communicated this message every way possible. You turn on the TV, you see everyone saying the same thing. President Biden says you have to get a vaccine. Every doctor you've ever could name says get a vaccine. Every scientist, every health professional, everybody has said get a vaccine. I don't know that you can communicate any more than we have communicated how important it is to get a vaccine. I've said it 987,000 times. My children keep count of how many times I tell them something. Not that it sinks in or they listen, but they keep count of how many times I say something. We need a different approach. And the approach has to be community-based organizations who can have conversations in the community with people who know them, who culturally know them, who know their issues and their fears, and it almost has to be a one-on-one conversation with that 25%. Because it's not going to be a top-down message. It has to be someone who speaks their language literally and figuratively and says, let's talk about this. Tell me what you're worried about. Tell me what your fear is. And then addresses it with facts. And that's what we're going to start doing today. We have great community organizations that are organized all across the state. And we're going to fund them to go out and literally have these conversations in these communities. Hispanic Federation, Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, the New York Immigration Coalition, the Asian American Federation, the Charles B. Wang Community Center, APICA Community Health. They are going to organize to get into these communities door to door and have these conversations with people in the community to get those numbers up. We're also going to do another new public service announcement that shows New Yorkers, other New Yorkers, and what we've done in an attempt to communicate. And we'll show you that now.
Early on, New York State had the highest rate of COVID infections in the nation.
That was scary. But we were New York State tough.
And now we have one of the lowest infection rates.
We still need you.
To get your vaccine.
Together.
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 Together. We will beat
this virus.
Like only New Yorkers can.
Stay tough, New York State.
Beat the virus.
Beat the virus.
And look, in closing, before I turn it over to my guests, we cannot go through what we went through over the past year. We can't. We can't. You can't. I can't. The economy can't. Society can't. We can't go through it again. We did have the highest infection rate because we were attacked by COVID before we knew COVID was ever here. Remember what happened to us. Everybody was saying COVID was in China. President Trump, China, 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 China. COVID left China. It went to Europe. And it was in Italy and France and Spain. And nobody knew it. And all those flights were coming into JFK and were coming into Newark Airport and landing at LaGuardia. And COVID was coming here for months and no one knew it. And then when we discovered it, it was too late. We had COVID cases before they knew it was COVID. And then it just took off on us, and that's why we had the highest infection rate. And we were alone. It was like a New York-only phenomenon. Or talk to these other governors, and they say, well, I don't know what's going on in New York, but we don't have that here. It wasn't because of us. It wasn't something about our immune system. It's just that it came here first. And we had to fight back from that highest infection rate. And it was hard, and it was painful, and we lost a lot of loved ones all along the way, and we learned a lot. But we cannot now go back to where we were, and I am telling you, as I sit here, I have told you the facts on COVID from day one. Whether they were easy, whether they were hard, I told you the truth. While a lot of people were talking politics And a lot of people were talking theory, and a lot of people were trying to deny because they didn't want to deliver bad news. I told you the truth. You know why? Because I believe in you. I believe in New Yorkers. I believe if they get the truth and if they get the facts, they will do the right thing. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I know New Yorkers. Give them the facts. Yeah, but the facts are ugly. Doesn't matter. Give them the facts and they will do the right thing. I am telling you as I sit here today, if we do not make progress on vaccinating that unvaccinated population, 25%, with the Delta variant, you're going to see the numbers go up. And that is a large number. And we're going to lose lives. And it will be disruptive. And we cannot let that happen. I'll do everything I can. But you know what it comes down to for me? What it comes down to for me is giving you the facts and you the truth so you can do what you need to do. Who brought us from the highest rate of infection to the lowest? Not me. New Yorkers did. Because they got the facts and they did the right thing. We have to do the same thing here. Everybody's saying, oh, the numbers are going up, the numbers are going up, the numbers are going up. Yes, the numbers are going up. Do something about it. Do something about it. And that's what makes us different as New Yorkers. Because we act. We're not passive. We're not just going to sit there and let it happen to us. We see the problem coming. We see the cloud on the horizon. We see where it's moving. Let's get to work together as New Yorkers. Recognize our individual responsibility and get this job done. That's what I mean by New York tough. Everybody says, oh, you New Yorkers, you're tough. You're tough. When I was in the federal government in the Clinton administration, I worked in every state in the United States. Somehow they would figure out they'd figure out that I was from New York. I don't know how they did that. I think maybe it was my tie used to give me away. But they'd figure out I was from New York and they'd say, oh, you New Yorkers, you guys are tough. I'd say, yeah, we're tough, but we're tough in a good way. We're not tough in a bad way. We're tough in a good way. You have to be a little tough to live in this town. But we're tough in a way that makes us smart. And it makes us united. Otherwise, this doesn't work unless we're united. People from all over the globe in one place. We're united. And we're disciplined. When we have to get a job done, we do it, and we're loving. We care about each other. I wear a mask because I care about you. I get a vaccine because I care about you. We understand that we are all in this together. We understand that as goes one, goes all in this city where we all live together and in this state where we all live together. We have to get back to work. We have to get back to work. And we have to get back to work now. And we have to spread this message or we're going to spread the virus. And we have to get in those communities and we have to knock on those doors and we have to convince people and put them in a car and drive them and get that vaccine in their arm. That is the mission. And while everyone else in the country is saying, oh, boo, the sky is falling, the numbers are going up, New Yorkers are going to say, yeah. And that means we're going to get ourselves in gear, and we're going to get the job done. And the people who are with us today will be on the front lines, and the people who are in this room will be on the front lines. And I will be there with you. We went from the highest infection rate to the lowest. Now let's show this nation how to stop the spread of COVID among an unvaccinated population. If anybody can do it, New York can do it. And we will do it. Thank you. You go first. I'm going to turn it over to a person who I admire very, very much. And she's been through many critical situations, and her leadership has always shown New York a light. Jennifer Jones Austin.
Thank you, Governor. I first want to begin by doing something that many of us don't get the chance to do, and that is to thank you. Thank you for your leadership throughout this pandemic. It's been a long 16 months, and you've stayed the course. It's been a long haul, and it's continuing, and we know that we can count on you to stay the course. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Jen. Thank you.
I want to thank you for inviting me here today, but more importantly, I want to thank you for the funding that you've announced to support community-based organizations on the ground, reaching out and engaging with those who have been hesitant to take the vaccine up until now. The new funding that is being provided for community-based organizations throughout New York will greatly expand our joined-up efforts to make sure everyone is accurately informed about the vaccine and that everyone has easy access to it. The research, as the governor talked to us, is showing us that the great majority of those who sadly and tragically are becoming infected, hospitalized, and dying these days from COVID-19 are unvaccinated. And so often they're from the communities that have been hardest hit, communities of color. With this funding, local organizations with deep connections and earned trust in these communities, organizations in my neck of the woods, in my community as an African-American woman, organizations with local branches and chapters such as the NAACP, the National Urban League, and the National Action Network, many, many more like them and working with them who are on the ground working on behalf of our communities are going to have the financial support that they need to reach people with the most accurate and up-to-date information and then get them to the places where they can get the vaccine. Years ago, when I was battling a life-threatening illness and I needed a bone marrow transplant from a donor of African descent, I turned to the community, my community, for help. I needed my community to bring me along. And the community responded. The community showed up. I got a transplant, and I survived. And I learned community is best positioned to take care of community. And that's just what this funding is going to allow. It's what this funding is going to enable. Community taking care of community. Now, we all have a role to play in this critical final push. I'm going to call it the final push. We're not going to be at this for the long, or much longer if we all do what we need to do. So it's the critical final push. We've come so far in this battle to end COVID-19. It's like a race, and we all have to finish strong. Not doing all that we can to get as many people as possible vaccinated is like nearing the end of the race and not finishing strong. Now, I'm not a preacher. Well, I'm not a licensed preacher. But I do read and I do follow the scripture. And in this moment of urgency, I am leaning in on a verse in the second book of Timothy, chapter 4, verse 7. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I have remained faithful. Governor, with your support and with this funding, we're going to remain faithful, we're going to keep fighting the fight, and we're going to finish and finish strong. Again, I say thank you.
I think Jennifer Jones Austin has the genes of a preacher. Don't you agree? Let's give her another round of applause. Let me turn it over to Frankie Miranda, who is the President and CEO of the Hispanic Federation, who's been a great partner to us and the state of New York all through this COVID pandemic on many other issues also. Frankie Miranda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Governor. And it's such an honor to be here with you, your team, and my colleagues. Hispanic Federation and its network of agencies have been on the front line since day one on the health crisis to ensure access to critical services and information. The COVID-19 pandemic, we all know, exacerbated long-standing inequities in our communities of color. And for months, we have seen vaccination rates of people of color trailing behind. But our community, Latinos, are hungry for information. Our job is to empower communities with the information they need to get vaccinated. We have learned the best tactics to overcome these barriers. Trusted sources providing culturally competent vaccine events and information. The financial support, the governor, you have announced today and you have made possible is vital to clearing roadblocks through vaccine education and outreach in the areas with the highest need in New York State. We're already doing everything we can to make sure our communities know that everyone 12 years of age and older should get the vaccine. But access is not about availability, and equity is not about equality. Access means shots administered during hours that working people can make, in community centers that people trust, with the right incentives and with the information in multiple languages. All people can be equally eligible, but equity is meeting people where they are and in the language they speak. Nationwide, Latino community-based organizations and its culturally competent services continue to be the most effective but underutilized resource to fight this pandemic in our communities. Investing in these organizations is how we will defeat COVID in the Latino community. And thank you, Governor, for your leadership and vision of making us a priority to support the work of the most trusted messengers in our communities, our Latino nonprofits. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Joanne Yu, who does really incredible work on so many issues and has made so much progress. Joanne is the Executive Director of the Asian American Federation. Joanne, thank you for everything. Thank you for being here. Joanne Yu.
Thank you, Governor, for inviting me to be here and for the support that you've announced. It's really wonderful to be up here actually with all of the colleagues that I talk to on a daily basis and see many of my colleagues sitting in the audience. This grant will help us send a very clear message of our shared priority, and that message is every New Yorker, especially those in the Pan-Asian American community, please go get the vaccine. This is how we will crush COVID. This is how we will destroy the Delta variant. I know that the anti-Asian attacks in our community this year can make it worrisome to leave your neighborhood. I have expressed this to the governor's staff, and they heard the message loud and clear, and the governor understands this. So there are places in our community, such as Korean Community Services and the Charles B. Wong Community Health Center, where you can go get the vaccine. By getting vaccinated, you will help our community and all the communities in New York State to rebuild our state after this horrible pandemic and to resume our lives. Thank you, Governor Cuomo, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Joanne. And batting cleanup, we have Murad Awada from the Executive Director of the New York Immigration Coalition, which has a statewide operation, is very effective on the ground, and is going to be a tremendous asset. Murad.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon now, everyone. How's it going? My name is Murad Awada. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Immigration Coalition. We are the nation's largest and oldest statewide immigrant rights organization of its kind. We have over 200 members across the state of New York, from Buffalo down to Brooklyn, from Brooklyn to the East End and Long Island. Thank you for having us, Governor, here with you today. Over the past year, we have lived through one of the most challenging times of any of our lives. If you think back to any other moment in life, what has been more challenging than the past 16 months? And we've come a long way. And today is not the day that we let go of the gas and start braking. We actually hit it harder to go faster so that we can continue to accelerate back to living as normal as possible. I also want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that the most marginalized and most vulnerable amongst us were hardest hit through the pandemic. And through the work that we have done at the New York Immigration Coalition and our membership across the state of New York, we were able to react almost immediately in providing PPE, in providing cash assistance, food assistance. To this day, people are still hungry. The vaccination is the final critical effort we need to make to defeat COVID-19. for good. But not all communities are taking the shot. Today's announcement of $15 million to improve education and awareness of the benefits of the vaccine is vital. We need to spread the word. And our communities, our staff, and our members are ready to do that. This funding will help organizations with local networks reach New Yorkers who haven't yet taken the vaccine and bring them into the fold. After all, the best protection against COVID-19 is the vaccination. I thank the governor and his staff, Secretary of State, for their efforts on behalf of underserved communities and look forward to seeing a healthier, safer New York as a result of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Murad. I'm excited. I believe in this strategy. I believe it's going to work. I believe these groups have the credibility. I believe we have the facts now. We have a very strong case. You know, it's not like we're asking people to take a vaccine the first week of this situation, right? You have an entire world that has been taking the vaccine. But with this manner of communication, the credibility they bring, the facilities they bring, I think it's going to make a big, big difference. We're going to get to work. Any questions from the press? We'll take a couple. Seeing no questions.
Governor, until last week, New York was the only state in the nation that hadn't sent out billions of rent relief to people in need. Only a dozen New Yorkers got help last Monday. How many are going to get help this week? Who's accountable for the slow, glitch-plagued rollout? And what will you do to get the money out before the moratorium lifts or the Fed shift money to New York money to a state with a better program? And also, Governor, why is your office calling the AG's probe politically motivated when many of your allies have called for people to support her integrity? And lastly, Governor, every day in your press release, you tell New Yorkers that the total COVID death count is about 43,000 people. But death certificate data that you send to the feds show that 54,000 people have died of COVID. Why aren't you sharing the more accurate, higher figure with New Yorkers? So just summary, it was rent relief.
Yeah, no, I got what it was. That's what my job is a joy, isn't it? None of the questions are leading, by the way. On the rent relief, you're not accurate about all states. The rent relief funding will go out. It'll go out by August 31st, which is when we have a moratorium in this state. That says nobody can be evicted until August 31st for non-payment of rent. And it will go out by then, so nobody will be affected. There's also a balance here. You want to get the money out the door right away. We went through this last year with unemployment benefits. But you want to make sure you give the money to the people who need it most, and there's no fraud and there's no scam. Otherwise, I'll get a question. Same person will ask me a question in 3 weeks. How did so many people receive funding when they were ineligible? Why didn't you check? Why didn't you take your time and make sure that there was no fraud? The program has guidelines. People have to follow the guidelines. We have to make sure the money goes to the people who need it most. We're going to start with funding the poorest tenants and then work our way up, which we think is fair. And the funding will be out by August 31st. Let me mention the Department of Justice announced over the weekend that they were not investigating New York State and other states for nursing home deaths. I don't know if you caught this, but last year in the middle of the campaign, President Trump was saying he was saying a lot of things. COVID is not a problem. COVID isn't real. COVID's going to be gone by Easter. Don't worry, it's just a Democratic conspiracy. And then he shifted to COVID is only a problem because Democratic governors mishandled it. And he pointed to deaths in nursing homes, which was a particular problem across the nation, and said, well, the Democratic governors caused deaths in nursing homes. That was his political narrative. They then started an investigation with the Department of Justice against 4 Democratic states and 4 Democratic governors during the Republican National Convention, which I'm sure was a coincidence. to make this point. And the Department of Justice announced an investigation, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, 4 Democratic states, 4 Democratic governors, and that they were going to investigate us for causing deaths in nursing homes. The political environment has gotten so toxic in this country, so toxic, so mean. It was an outrageous allegation. New York followed the CDC guidance. CDC is a federal agency that's supposed to know what they're talking about in terms of health. We followed the CDC guidance when it came to how we handled people in nursing homes and when they went to a hospital, when they were brought back to the nursing home. Second, by the number of deaths as a percentage, number of nursing home deaths as a percentage, New York is number 31 in the country. We're not even near the top in terms of percentage of deaths in nursing homes. Why New York? Except that it was all politically motivated. And the Department of Justice announced this weekend that they're not investigating those states. Of course, this was political hyperbole, and of course, this fed into the politics of the time. Democratic governors caused COVID. President had nothing to do with anything. But this kind of toxic politics is bad. First of all, people lose trust in the system and in government. Department of Justice is supposed to be the Department of Justice. It's not supposed to be a political operation. It's not supposed to be you investigate political enemies. You call up the Attorney General and say, I want you to start this investigation against my political enemies. Right? People lose faith in the integrity of the system. Second, to say to people who lost a loved one in a nursing home, it could have been prevented. It was a mistake by government bureaucrats. That's why your loved one died. How cruel. How cruel. You lose a loved one in a nursing home. I lost my father. You say to yourself, why, God? Why did you take him, such a good man? And then they suggest, well, maybe your loved one didn't have to die. It was a government mistake. How mean to do to the families who lost a loved one in a nursing home. And third, what we should have been talking about was what happened and how do we learn from it so it doesn't happen again. How did COVID get into the nursing homes? Why didn't they have enough PPE? Why didn't we have enough tests? Why didn't we have enough swabs? Learn the lesson because it's going to happen again. But it was politics. It was toxic politics. It violated the basic concept of justice in this nation. And it did a lot of harm and a lot of damage. And it went on too long. This went on for like a year until finally the Department of Justice dismissed it. In general, with the AG's review, let the process continue. Let the facts come out. I'm very eager to get the facts to the people of this state. And I think when they hear the actual facts of what happened and how the situation has been handled, I think they're going to be shocked. Shocked. Because at the end of the day, the truth wins and facts win. And then I don't care what your bias, you're a conservative reporter, you're a liberal reporter, facts trump, pardon the pun, ideology. And I am eager for the truth to come out here, and New Yorkers will be shocked. Any other questions?
You didn't answer my questions, Governor. I was asking, why is your office calling the AGs pro-politically motivated when many of your allies have called for people to support her integrity? And why are you telling the public every day that 43,000 New Yorkers have died of COVID when actually that number is 54,000 and much higher? Why aren't you sharing the most accurate rate?
There are two different death rates. One is reported by the state, one we report to the CDC, which counts the death toll differently. There are two different definitions. CDC, we provide the data, they report one. We report the numbers the way we've been counting them from day one. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
You want to explain the difference in the two? Hold it. Get an answer. If you want an answer, get an answer.
So the difference in presumed deaths versus actual confirmed COVID deaths, we have been, since this time last year, doing confirmatory testing for COVID-19 on all decedents in the state. We believe our number is more accurate. The presumed data is requested and is reported, and the CDC chooses to report that larger number.
Yeah, so in other words, there are two definitions. One is people who you actually know died of COVID. That's the number that the state reports. Actual confirmed deaths by COVID. CDC asks for actual deaths and presumed deaths of COVID. What does that mean, presumed death? Well, that means the nursing home operator or the hospital operator wasn't really sure, but they said we presume they died from COVID. Depending on how much faith you put in presumptions, that's one number. The actual death and presumed dead, that's the CDC number. Our number is actual death. On the AG's report, I said I have concerns as to the independence of the reviewers. That's what I've said. And is politics, is this all happening in a political system? Yes, that is undeniable. Question?
On the AG report, is your message to voters then that they should not trust the outcome of the investigation?
No,
do you regret initially authorizing the investigation a few months back when you called for your resignation?
As I said here today, I believe in New Yorkers. I am a lifelong New Yorker. I know New Yorkers. They are not naive. They know what's going on. They know what these reviews entail and who's involved. And when they get the facts, I am very confident that they will be shocked at what they have heard about this versus what they know about it. And I'm confident that when they get the facts, they're going to understand exactly what happened.
Governor, why are you calling the independent investigators?
Excuse me, you asked enough questions.
I know, but why are you calling the independent investigators unreliable? What's the evidence?
Look at who the independent investigators are.
They've been widely supported by you and many of your supporters and experts in the state.
Do a little history. Go to Google. Google the independent reviewers and tell me what you see. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that the Assembly should only consider articles of impeachment based solely on the AG report?
The Assembly will consider. The Assembly investigation is broader and has a broader mandate and is independent.
Well, you maintain through all of this, you can keep leading the state. We haven't seen you in 10 days as Delta has spiked. How do you reassure New Yorkers you won't go dark every time there's a major development in the AG's investigation?
Because I never go dark. That was said just before we were about to do the state budget, right? You had some elected officials say, oh, he's not going to be able to get the budget done because he's going to be distracted. We got the budget done. We got the budget done on time. And we've done phenomenal work every day since. And COVID, we are 100% on top of COVID. Now, COVID has been in a different place, obviously, than it was. And as you also know, COVID now, the state role has changed on COVID, right? You're aware of that? You're aware of the new legislation? Yeah, I don't think you are. The state was in charge of all COVID decisions, and which meant we made decisions for every locality in the state. That has now changed because COVID came down, the emergency abated, and we said, give the authority back to the localities. So now you have localities making decisions on COVID. So New York City will decide, Nassau will decide, Suffolk will decide, Westchester decides. So they're making decisions on the day-to-day management of COVID. I will say this to the localities. I think they should be taking this very seriously. I think this spike in numbers is alarming. I think when you talk about employees who work for government, who are public-facing, that we should be taking precautions. You know you have government employees who interact with the public all the time. One person who is infected can see 50 people, 100 people a day. So I think the localities should take this very seriously, and I would urge them to take significant action now. Now, the way we beat COVID is we got ahead of it. You don't win if you're behind it. If you wait for the numbers to go up, it's too late. I would urge the localities to act now. But by law, it is a local decision, unless, God forbid, the numbers get so bad, there's another state emergency crisis, and the state has to take over, which I don't even want to think about. I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to go through that again.
Will you require state employees to get vaccinated? What about state employees? Will you require them to get vaccinated?
Do you mind if I let someone else ask a question?
You can answer that question.
Okay.
It's important.
Yeah, okay.
Given the Delta variant and also given the fact that these indicators are going up, you see what's going on in France where they're requiring so-called tests for anybody to be allowed in any sort of public venue. Is that something you would think about or consider something that New York City now is saying, mandating either a vaccine or a weekly test for all employees?
Juliet, right now these are decisions that are left to the localities. We have not declared a state takeover of local control, which I did early on in the pandemic, right? And we had that conversation. I said this is no longer a New York City problem or a Nassau problem or a Westchester problem. It's all of the above. And to deal with it intelligently, you need one statewide policy. You can't have a patchwork of policies. In Nassau, you wear a mask, but you take it off when you go to Suffolk, and then you put it back on when you go to Queens, but you take it off in Westchester. So confusing. They had all these different rules. We're not at the point where the legislature has passed legislation that would allow state action. It requires legislative action. So it's up to the localities right now. Oh, well, nervous. I don't like the word nervous, Juliet. I don't get nervous. I think if you look at these numbers, the direction they point is clear, and to avoid these numbers, you do it at your own peril. You do not slow this virus with baby steps and incremental actions. You don't slow the spread that way. We learned that lesson. Been there, done So I urge localities to take it seriously and act seriously, especially, Juliet, public-facing employees, right? Where you have an employee who's interacting with the public on a daily basis and is touching 100 people. I think they should take it very seriously. I think they should also be targeting these same communities in their area. And they should have an effort like what we're doing statewide. Get into those communities. You know the zip code. You know where they live. Go knock on every door with representatives of the community. Why don't you want to take a vaccine? What are you worried about? Speak their language and talk them through it and get them a vaccine. But the time to act is now. Otherwise, you're going to see those numbers keep going up. And people took false comfort in, well, we hit 75% vaccine rate. We're done. Hallelujah. Let's have a party, a bottle of champagne, it's done. No.
Whether state employees must be vaccinated?
The state would have to legislate to say New York City employees or Nassau employees or Buffalo employees would have to be vaccinated. Statewide, you know, we don't run many hospitals, we don't run schools, we don't run local police departments, we don't run local fire departments. Those are really the public-facing agencies, tend to be local agencies. All right, we're going to go to work. Thank you all very much. Thank you.